This week, we're going way back into the Old Testament. Now, last year we heard some of the amazing promises that God made to Abraham. One promise was that Abraham's descendants, his children's 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 children, would all be taken into a foreign land and be kept as slaves for 400 years. We also heard how Joseph was sold as a slave by his brothers and ended up in Egypt. And Joseph was used by God to save the land of Egypt and all of his father Jacob's family from the great famine. Abraham was Jacob's granddad, and so all of Jacob's family, Abraham's descendants, ended up in Egypt. Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, was so grateful to Joseph and gave Jacob's children land to live in, and life was good. Jacob had been given the name Israel by God, and his 12 sons all married and had children, and their children had children, and they all lived in Egypt together and became known as the children of Israel. But eventually that Pharaoh died, and a new Pharaoh was king over Egypt and didn't look so kindly on the children of Israel. There were just too many of them. What if they decided that they wanted Egypt for themselves? And so the new Pharaoh made the children of Israel slaves in Egypt. The Egyptians got the Israelites to make bricks and to build cities and to do all kinds of farming work out in the fields. But still God was with them and they continued to grow in number. Years passed, almost 400 years. Today's story starts with a scream. That noise, that's the sound of a baby. Not 2 minutes ago, the baby's mother, a lady called Jochebed, gave birth to a bouncing baby boy. Hurrah! Well, actually, maybe not. Remember how the pharaohs now hated the Israelites. There were too many of them, and they might want to fight and to take over the whole country of Egypt. But the latest pharaoh thought that if he could stop there being so many boys, then they couldn't grow up and be soldiers. His plan was simple. Kill every baby boy born to an Israelite. Yep, he wasn't a very nice guy. He went to the midwives, the ones who helped the women to give birth, and said, "When you're helping one of the Israelite women give birth, if she gives birth to a boy, then you must kill him. But if it is a girl, you can let her live." Well, the midwives knew that it was a very bad thing to kill a baby, and they knew that God wouldn't like it, so they didn't do what Pharaoh said. So then Pharaoh sent out an order to all the Egyptian people saying, "Every boy that is born to the children of Israel must be thrown into the Nile, but let every girl live." Now the Nile is a really long river. It flows all the way through Egypt and provided water to drink and meant the Egyptians could get the Israelites to water all their crops. It was also home to snakes, hippos and crocodiles. Not a safe place. Throwing a baby into the Nile meant that baby was going to die. So this baby, only a few minutes old, his life is already in danger. Pharaoh wants him dead. The boy's mum and dad were both of the tribe of Levi. Their family tree goes back to Levi, one of Joseph's brothers. His mother Jochebed didn't want her baby to die, so she hid him. She kept him quiet and made sure he was always well fed, so he didn't get hungry and start to cry. She managed to keep him hidden for 3 months. But soon he was growing bigger and bigger, and he was getting too noisy. They'd get found out. The baby boy would be killed, and the whole family might be too. Now Jochebed had an older daughter, a girl called Miriam, and they made a plan to make sure the boy would live. But how? Maybe they remembered the story of Noah, how God had protected Noah's family in the ark. Jochebed had a basket made of woven reeds. It was about the size of a baby. She made sure it was woven really tight so that no water could get through, and she covered it with tar, thick and sticky and water repellent, just like Noah did with the ark. She put the basket onto the river and it floated there among the reeds. Then, sad and scared, she put her baby boy into the basket. It bounced and bobbed, but it didn't leak. They had made a little basket boat, an ark built for one special little baby. Miriam, the baby's older sister, stayed close by to see what would happen to him. Now, maybe not coincidentally, Pharaoh's daughter, the princess of Egypt, would come down to a spot nearby to wash and to swim in the river. She'd have her slaves with her and probably some guards as well. And she saw the basket in the reeds and told one of her slaves to go and get it and to bring it to her. She could hear a sound coming from the basket. She opened it up and saw the baby who was crying, and she felt sorry for him. Who can resist a baby that just wants to be picked up and comforted? She saw this little baby boy inside. She picked him up and tried to soothe him. "This is one of the Israelite babies," she said. She knew Pharaoh, her father, had said that all Israelite baby boys were to be killed. What would she do? She could see how precious this little baby boy was. Then Miriam, the baby's sister, came up to Pharaoh's daughter. "Shall I go and find one of the Israelite women to look after the baby for you, to make sure he is fed and cared for?" Miriam just knew that having seen the baby boy, that Pharaoh's daughter would want to look after him. "Yes, go and find someone," said the princess. So Miriam went and found someone who was only too happy to look after the baby. Their mum, Jochebed. And the princess said to Jochebed, "Take this baby, look after him, and I will pay you." So despite Pharaoh saying that all Israelite baby boys must die, here was his daughter paying the baby's mum to look after him and keep him safe. And so Jochebed was paid to look after her own baby boy, although the princess didn't know that. And when he was a bit older, he went to live at the palace with the princess. She adopted him. He became her son, and she called him Moses. In Hebrew, the language of the Israelites, the name Moshe means to be pulled out, just as he was pulled out of the Nile. In Egyptian, the name Moses means son, just as the princess had taken him to be her son. God made lots of really amazing promises to the children of Israel, but not all of them were about wonderful things that God would give his people, or about the Messiah, the promised one, who would be sent from God. One of God's promises was to a man called Abraham, and he promised Abraham that his descendants, his children's 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 children, would be so many that they could not be counted, like the stars of the sky or the sand of the beach. God promised Abraham that through his descendants, all of the people of the world would be blessed. But God also promised that Abraham's descendants would be slaves in a foreign land for 400 years because they would disobey God and wouldn't believe God's promises. God always keeps his promises. In the Bible, time after time, we see God making a promise, and then years later, we see what was promised take place. Now, the 400 years of slavery are almost up, and we'll see next time what God did next. Just like God's promises to Noah, Joseph, Abraham and Moses were all true, so are God's promises to us. There are promises all through the Old Testament part of our Bibles about the coming promised one, the Messiah who would be king over all people. In the New Testament, we have recorded how Jesus came to fulfill those promises, that Jesus wasn't just a man, but was God's son, God here on earth, God with us. Now, our biggest problem is sin, all the wrong things we think and say and do. It causes issues between us and our friends and our family. It causes a bigger issue between us and God. God is perfect, and all our imperfections mean we can't be close to God, can't enjoy a relationship with him anymore. But Jesus, as well as being human, was God. He never did anything wrong. He was perfect. And when Jesus, the perfect Son of God, died on a cross 2,000 years ago, he willingly took the punishment for all the wrong things. All of them. Every wrong thing you have ever thought and said and done. Every wrong thing I have ever thought and said and done. And all the wrong things we will ever think and say and do. Jesus took the punishment for it all. Jesus fulfilled all the promises of God. All we have to do is accept it. All we need to do is admit to God the wrong we have done, to say sorry to God, and to accept that Jesus died for us. And the Bible makes some amazing promises for everyone who does. That God will forgive us, that we will have peace, that we will have life in all its fullness, and that Jesus has gone to prepare a place for us, and that he will come again to take us to be with him. These are just some of the promises that Jesus made to you and to me, and God always keeps his promises. Thank you for listening.